You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market. From unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike TOSAW from RCM Asset Management, Andrew the Rock Lobster GIOVINAZZI from OptionFit.com, and Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionFit.com. The Option Block is brought to you by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody, that rockin' bit of tunage means it is time to rock out here with the Option Block, whether you're joining us live every Monday and Thursday, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, or after the fact on your device of choice. Welcome. We love to have you. Make sure you keep sending in those questions, those comments, those insights, those pearls of wisdom. We do love to hear from you guys. If you like what you hear, make sure you head on over to your platform of choice. I know this show's been going for a long time, so we have a great core of listeners, but there's always new people discovering the show. If you want to help that process, then leaving a review in your platform of choice. I know it's challenging because we have the network feed, and we have the show feed for this, so you can leave it wherever you like. But the show feed might help new people discover this show, but the network feed helps them discover all of it. So wherever you feel inclined to leave your ratings, have at it. And we do love to hear from you guys. Just don't ask questions in those platforms. It's better to get them the more immediate ways. Then we can see them faster and get your answer back to you faster. And let's see who's joining me today to help answer some of those aforementioned questions. First off, let's go out to a sleepy hamlet known as St. Charles, where we are joined once again by Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, how go things in the land of the Saints, sir?
Well, my kids are going to be going to St. Charles North. They're the North Stars. St. Charles East is the Saints. So we are North Star people.
Oh, well, there you go. I did not mean to disparage the North Stars. How dare I? See, you get these little idiosyncrasies of various regions. If you don't know, see, you step right into it, just like that, listeners. But, at least they're overcoming rickets out there, and I'm glad to hear that. The fight is going well in St. Charles. Now we move on over to the land that time forgot, a.k.a. Maine, where he's almost even beyond Maine. He's on the border. He's on the hinterlands. He's pretty much almost in the ocean, listeners, where we are joined by the rock lobster himself, Mr. Andrew Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com by way of Carmen Line Capital. Mr. G, how go things in the land of Maine, sir?
They're going well. There is frost on the water coming in, so I think the difference in temperature is probably like from 45 to 70 something from where it was in August. So it does look cold, and like the Dean Martin song says, maybe it's cold outside right now. But things are good. Things are good.
I don't even know. You can't sing that song anymore, sir. Deeply inappropriate. So you've just offended half of our audience.
I just heard the new version, which was, so stupid. But anyway.
I haven't heard that one yet, but I'm looking forward, of course, to that, because everything new is better, right? All right, and last but not least, we are also joined, holding down the hot seat this week, is the last data Krypton from the Fidelity Active Trader Strategy Desk. Mr. Trey, welcome back to the program, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Always happy to be back. And, for once, I don't get to brag about the sunny Florida weather that I have. I can be right alongside with Andrew. It's freezing here. I had to grab a jacket on the way out today. So a little different story for us down here. I think it was in the 60s, so we're really struggling.
I was going to say, jacket, that must mean 65 for you guys?
Did he say the 60s?
The 60s, can you believe it?
60s.
Freezing.
Andrew's kids are swimming in the ocean in bathing suits when it's in the 60s.
That's a heat wave.
Yes. You put on the AC in Maine when it hits the 60s. All right, with these differing temperature gauges in front of us here, let's keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the trading block. A lot to watch today, a lot of interesting things going on and kind of interesting perspectives on the market. Most of the major indices are kind of mixed to kind of off to start the show here today. Seems like after all this optimism, all this protracted upside over the past couple of weeks over this trade war optimism, maybe some of that a little bit overdone. Not really a lot, though. Most of the major indices slightly off today. NASDAQ is off about 0.1%, so leading the charts to the downside. Dow right around there, almost 0.1%. S&P a paltry, a mere 0.05%. So pretty much not a lot going on out here. Gold slightly up, oil coming off a little bit. If you want to hear more about that kind of fun stuff, you got an all-listener mail palooza, TWIFO, coming up in a little bit. So stay tuned for that. Going to have a couple in-studio guests for that, so that should be fun. And if you're wondering, you're saying to yourself, well, first off, let's see what our old friend VIX Cash is up to here. With all this downside on the screen, that means VIX getting a little bit of a lift again, up about a third of a point, which puts it at about 13 1/3. So right about a little bit north of that 13 handle, which is interesting. I'll have to see how that lines up for my prognostication. I think that's a little bit higher than my prognostication from this. Actually looks good for what Simon was picking for vol views, but we got a whole day, and we all know 24 hours plus is an eternity in the volatility landscape. If you're saying to yourself, this has been a long bull run we've been on, you are correct. Of course, it is the longest bull market we've seen. If you date it back to the origins, a lot of people think of March 9th, 2009. It's also pretty much the best, I guess, if you want to turn it by overall absolute return. It's number one, which I guess makes sense. Longest upside move should equate to the most gain, and that's exactly what it's at. Looks like they crunched the numbers here. This firm, the Luthold Group, not familiar with them. They said it's up to 468% gain for the S&P through the beginning of November, so not a bad run. Also the best performing, so I guess an overall total return since World War II. So if you like yourself some bullish action, you're a happy camper right now. Since we're talking bullish action and optimism and all things being rosy, let's start in the land of Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike, sir, are you excited to be part of this longest running and indeed best bull market ever, sir?
You know what? I think I'm going to become bearish. I think I'm just going to start buying lots of puts. And no, just kidding. Very exciting. This is an exciting time with which we're living in. The thing about this bull market that I like that differs from the dot-com bubble and the dot-com bubble bursting is that it's very broad-based. In that the dot-com bubble, we had a lot of crazy go find your petdander.com or whatever, stocks like that, getting a lot of the rallies that are causing a lot of the rally in the late 90s. And We had the credit bubble that ended up making things burst about 10 years ago when we had the crash in '08. But what's unique about this bull market is that things are overall fundamentally pretty solid. We've had relatively low interest rates throughout this whole time, and that's another debate in and of itself, but this is a pretty strong economy that we have at this point. The disadvantage of this economy that we have has always been the disadvantage that we've had, at least as long as I've been living, and that's the debt that we have as a country. But aside from that, times are pretty good overall, in my opinion. The other thing that I think that we need to be looking at right now in the near term or the short term, whatever you want to call it, we've been relatively flat the last few days. And so the S&P, it seems like the next point of resistance or next key number is 3,100. I don't think this is going to be as much of a key number as the 3,000 mark was. It seems like we were talking about being at that mark forever, or around that area forever. But this is something to where we're going to have to overcome, and that when you have new all-time highs or near new all-time highs like we've been having recently, there's got to be something for the market to kind of point at and use as resistance in some way, shape, or form. And for right now, I think 3,100 is. The other question that's going to need to be answered in the near term will be the China deal. What's it going to do? We're going to get some type of news in the next week or two, I think, in terms of we've got a deal, and we'll see where that goes. But if we get that, the thing that's going to be unique to see is this going to be a buy the rumor, sell the news type of reaction to it? Or will this be, finally a deal with China, so now we can rally? And so that's the question that we're going to have to answer over the course of the next few weeks, if and when we get news on that. Of course, we have impeachment hearings that are, or we have the impeachment news that's happening. It's also something that I think isn't going to be that much of a big deal on the marketplace, but it is news to say the least. And, we got this thing called the Fed. I think Trump was saying recently that he wishes that we go to negative interest rates, if I'm not mistaken. But it does seem that him and Powell are continuing to have their war of words with one another. So there's a lot of macro things that are taking place in this market. Now that earnings are pretty much done, we need to focus on something. And the macro seems to be what the focus is right now for what's driving the marketplace. And that's what I am looking at.
Thank you for that, sir. Now let's move on back. Let's go on back to the hot seat. Let's go on back to that squirmy hot seat. When the Song of Ice and Fire is here, it's the Iron Throne. Today it's the hot seat from Krypton, Mr. Jarrell, sir. What are the folks out there in Fidelity Land? What are they trading on this kind of mixed day, sir?
Pretty busy. Earnings still in focus here for a lot of Fidelity clients this week. So, taking a look at our orders by Fidelity customers, number one today was Cisco Systems popped up as the most traded. And Fidelity customers right now taking this as an opportunity to buy. So the stock is down just under 8% right now, or about $3.70. So a big dip on that earnings announcement. They actually made their number, but lowered their guidance for the next quarter. And when you lower guidance, that's not always a good sign, and market sort of taking it negatively here. But as I mentioned, Fidelity customers a little contrarian on this one. We've got about 72% of those orders in actually coming in on the buy side. So kind of an interesting take on it here. But looking at Cisco, checking out the chart, it's been fairly interesting, right? It had some new highs here in July. But the prior earnings announcement here in August, is really where we saw that first big dip in Cisco. It traded down into that earnings. At that earnings announcement, broke below that 200-day moving average. It has been kind of stuck in this range between 45 and 50 since then. So, today's earnings announcement, taking it down maybe below some of that support we've seen over the last few months, which is right around that $46 price target. So, hitting some lows that really hasn't touched since really the beginning of this year, taking us back to January. Before we saw those levels here as well. So it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Option market, here pretty split between calls and puts with a little bit more activity on the call side. And of those, a little bit more call buyers, about 44,000 to 31,000. So, maybe from the option market sentiment, maybe slightly leaning towards that bullish side with the Fidelity customers. So maybe looking at some of this support, maybe thinking the stock's going to hold. We'll see. Seems like it's kind of caught maybe this level here around 44.70. It's hit a couple of times today and managed to reverse off of it. So that was the first one here today that drew some interest, obviously coming in at number one. Kind of sticking to the earnings front here. The other big name reporting here today as well was Walmart. So Walmart and stock doing almost even right now, up about 16 cents this morning, though. A really big jump after that announcement, right? Stock closed about this range, 121 and change. Yesterday it was as high as 125.50 in pre-market. Opened right around 125, and since then, really lost some momentum. So it looked like it was going to be a strong day here coming into that, but sitting at this point, right at even. But they beat their numbers, came in with a positive guidance here for the next year as well. So all things that you think would be a positive momentum for the stock, but at this point, kind of coming back here a little bit. Fidelity customers on Walmart were leaning a little bit towards that bullish side. So got about 61% buys to 39% sells. So maybe seeing this from that positive fundamental standpoint is a potential opportunity, even though it's, really sitting at those all-time highs, or at least hit them here today. Option market, very interesting here today, I thought, on Walmart. So you look at the calls to puts, 186,000 calls to 73,000 puts. So really leaning heavily towards that call side here as well. This will be one I'll be curious to kind of keep an eye on. It really looked like it was going to break out above those upper ranges and maybe continue today. So kind of interesting to see it pull back right to this range where we've been the last few days. So, and the third one that we had an eye on, not an earnings report, but one that's certainly been in the news, and I know we've talked about quite a few times, actually coming in at number 2 on our orders by Fidelity customers, was Disney here today. So pulling back a little bit at 147.50, down $1.22 here right now. Fidelity customers, still buying Disney. Got about 60% buys to 40% sells. But yesterday on Disney, what an interesting chart, interesting news. They had the streaming service come out here this week. And yesterday, around the middle of the day, they announced they had a little over 10 million subscribers here already after one day. And the stock just skyrocketed. It was trading about 137.50 at that time. Finished the day at 148.50. So 11-point move throughout the day for a company of that size. Very interesting. Since then, kind of been trading sideways since that high yesterday. Looked like it was going to break out again earlier today, but kind of pulling back here a little bit throughout the day. Option market been very busy in Disney here too. About 460,000 contracts traded today, right? Where the average is usually about 97,000, with 350,000 of those coming on the call side here. So, sentiment might be looking a little more bullish from the option market here on Disney. But the chart on Disney has been interesting overall. Here, after that initial announcement back in April, the streaming service, had this huge gap up here from about 115 up to this 128, 130 range. Was pushing higher, but after the earnings announcement here beginning of August, was trailing down, catching that 200-day moving average as support. So had that positive earnings report last week, plus the streaming. Has boosted this stock up from around 130 to 147 in just a week's time. So very interesting stock, and all the news going on with the different streaming service and competition there has been an interesting story to follow. That was it from the stocks we had. One other thing that has kind of been catching my eye here this week. Here been an interesting story the last couple of years. Just paying attention to that the Russell 2000 index. And over time, right, it's continuing to show it having some trouble every time we get to the 1600 range as a potential resistance. But we hit this, fell into this range here again last week, and or about a week and a half ago now, actually, where it's just approached this 16 and just, kind of pulling back. And we've had some strong reversals off of that. Just every time we watch it, seeing if this is the time that, we actually get that breakthrough and continuation or another reversal, and really just been kind of choppy and back and forth. Up here today at 1590, but certainly want to be paying attention to see if it, finally gets that breakthrough or not. But that's what I had on my radar here for today.
The good old Russell 2000. I have those guys coming into the studio in about half an hour from Russell. So we'll be talking a lot of Russell in a little bit. So I'll be sure to mention your technical issues with it to them there, Mr. Last Data Crypto. I'm sure they'll be excited to hear. Fidelity folks. Russell 2000 for whatever reason doesn't get the love. Is that a popular product over there at Fidelity Land, sir?
It'll come up every now and then here, so certainly, we'll see some traders, looking at the IWM and IWM options. So it'll pop up every now and then. It's usually around these ranges, where we're seeing hit some of these technical levels, but just such a long sideways, action that it's had compared to, the S&P 500, right? Just seeing that lack of follow through from the small caps has been kind of an interesting story to follow. But I didn't mean to preview the next show, but that's I guess a good lead in for the next segment.
There you go. I'll have to beam you in about half an hour or about an hour to kick off all things TWIFO. They'll appreciate that over there. But you're right, it is an interesting beast, and for a lot of people, coming to grips with what it means from a small cap perspective, they are structurally more volatile than the S&P 500, the large cap, so that's interesting to a lot of people, but also it kind of moves to the beat of its own drummer, as you kind of just outlined, and that's hard for people to sometimes wrap their heads around, particularly in the trade war time. Everyone thought, this is a very domestic-focused index, and this is all macro, and yet the Russell 2000 has been moving all over the place, so it has been fascinating to watch that over there. Speaking of fascinating, I don't know if he qualifies, but we'll find out anyway. Mr. Rock Lobster, sir, A, are you fascinating, and B, if not, what fascinating information do you have to regale us with today, sir?
What is fascinating? So I actually one of my students sent me a snap from Goldman about comparing volatility in the VIX futures, and the Fed future right now is higher than it was in July, when VIX cash was actually a little higher back then. So what basically is the front of the curve is kind of come down quite a bit, and the February is still expensive. So I figured I did try to think about it today, and it's probably around the impeachment thing. Like the Fed future at 18 is pretty high for a 13.44 cash right now. It's about $1 over, where I kind of view our sort of fair value, actually closer to $1.30 over. So there is a bid for vol on that end of the curve. The thing is like the short end, the market's not moving, right? We just moved kind of straight up in a very, what we'll call orderly fashion to 3,100 and stopped. And now we're just sitting here like, so very low realized vol, short term, but there's a bid for protection, around where I think whatever the impeachment thing kind of gets over, moves to the Senate or whatever. So I found that was kind of so that usually makes the market kind of like the moves are sort of strained. Like, let's see, a time that could be, people can maybe be like the Hanging Chad episode in the 2000 election, something like that. I think was probably the last time something like similar to this, or sort of like this political drama. We're waiting. The market just doesn't do very much. So you've got this really low realized vol short term, but because people are anxious, there's a bid for the vol, there's a bid for vol longer term, and then things just kind of decay and rot. Now, like TOSAW said, anything could happen. I think the market really wants some kind of ink on some kind of deal. They don't even care what it is. Even if it's Z and Trump, just take the back of a napkin and sign it. They'll be happy. And I think that's kind of where we are. So, earnings are pretty good. We're at all-time highs that you stated earlier. But there's definitely there's some push and pull in the vol market right now for sure. And I think that sort of February end is being pulled, or some protection. buying is going on while we are at all-time highs, because I don't think people want to sell. They want to ride whatever the trade deal is going up. So I think that's where we are. I think that's how we're going to stay until like some news breaks one way or another. But at least as far as at least VIX goes, we're not seeing anything new. Like the impeachment thing is not really turning over anything new, nothing like blockbuster yet. And it's day 2 in, and I don't know whether information is going to come out, but it feels like it's sort of done at this point as far as what kind of information is going to be delivered. But anyway, from that point of view, VIX is down up a little bit, SPX is down a little bit, and I think we kind of have this strange tension in the market until something breaks.
Let's see what's breaking out there in the broad market here coming into almost second half of our show here. Let's see what's lighting it up. VIX not really lighting it up out there these days. Not even 200,000, 186,000 contracts on the tape right now. The ADV, get this, listeners, a paltry 336,000. Mr. Rock Lobster, when's the last time you remember the ADV and VIX options that low? I have to go back and look. Maybe if we had Mr. Rhodes on, he could throw it off the top of his head. But that's pretty low. Do you concur, sir?
I do concur. Surprisingly low. That's what I say. I say there's the short end is just not a lot happening, but which means, and that's usually where people like to play in VIX. So it do not surprise me right now.
Yeah, it's pretty paltry. Even in the dog days of summer, listeners, when everyone's out there, on vacation, no one's trading, we still see it around 400,000 or so like that. So to be down to 336, that's pretty light, especially given all the macro trends and headwinds and things going on in this market right now. Kind of interesting. SPY threatening to hit 1 million. The ADV is about 2.4 million out there. SPX coming in, closing in on 600,000. The ADV a little bit north of 1 million. The Q's about 250,000 on the tape right now. The ADV about 525,000. And the Russell, at least in IWM form here, doing 103,000, the ADV about 300,000, so about a third out there as well. Let's get on to the most actives. Kind of interesting. We actually have some new names breaking into the top 10 today. Cost you 145,000 contracts to make it into the top 10 today, so that's actually pretty active, despite the fact that the broad indices aren't lighting it up. Let's look at number 10. Newcomer to the top 10. This is CGC, Canopy Growth. I do believe we'll be talking about them in a little bit as well. 145,000 contracts on the tape. They just had earnings this morning, so they're clearly in that post-earnings blush. Number 9, good old Bank of America, 145,000 as well, so a little bit of a tie there for the bottom of the top 10. Number 8, another newcomer, SO. This is Southern Company, which is kind of interesting. This is an American gas and electric utility based, as you might expect, in the southern United States. They did 146,000, so pretty much a slugfest there for the bottom of the top 10. Then we get to good old, some recognizable names. Number 7, which is Tesla, 194,000. Number 6, Roku, 209,000. Number 5, Walmart, 262 on the tape for good old Walmart. Number 4, AMD, perennial top 10er, hitting 289,000 contracts right now. Number 3, cover your ears, Uncle Mike, it is Cisco. 304,000. That's pretty hot for a Cisco post-earnings here as well. And then we got Apple, a mere number 2 today. That tells you what's going on. 416,000 out there for Apple. Number 1 with a bullet. I think you could probably guess. It's Disney, that streaming service, driving paper across the board. Trey said folks are buying it up out there in Fidelity land. Well, they're trading the options up there today as well. 461,000 contracts. Over 3/4 of that, 77%. On the call side of the ledger. So not only is it the most active, it's also the most biased. No, actually, I take that back. One name beat it in terms of biased paper, and that is Southern Company, a newcomer to the top 10. 99% of its flow coming on the call side of the ledger. So 144,000 of the 146,000 contracts going up in the call set. I'm kind of intrigued by that. We have some other names, of course. We had Walmart popping off before the bell today. We've got an NVIDIA after the bell. We've got AMAT after the bell as well. So a lot popping off today. Meanwhile, though, it's time for us to keep popping off into some unusual activity. It is time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, welcome to the Odd Block, listeners. Let's get right into it. Break down the weird, the wild, the wonderful paper. Let's start really quickly. I just had to know, listen, I had to know what was lighting it up out there in Southern Company that put it into our top 10 with 99% of the paper come on the call side. That's very unusual. So it made me wonder. And Mr. Rock Lobster, take a guess what day it is in Southern Company, sir, for all this call paper.
Could be dividend day?
Yes, exactly. It's when XDiv here is doing 24 times its normal volume right now. It's trading about 62.5, and the 50 calls are dominating the tape here. So someone obviously, that's actually not that far in the money for a div play, but still, yeah, all in the money calls here. So let's see what I can see really quick. I can't see the OI in that strike very clearly. I'll be curious to see how much of this couple 100,000 contracts almost, what the OI, probably 50,000, not even on that strike. So that'd be interesting. So yes, div play paper. That's why we don't pay attention to it too much, but it just had to know, listeners. It's just had to know. Let's move on to our first name here, our first official name that our Eye of Sauron brought back for us today. And this is everybody's favorite, of course. I'm talking LPLA. What the heck is LPLA, you might be asking me? Well, LPLA is LPL Financial Holdings. And they're trading right now $89 and about 60 cents, up about nearly 90 cents, or right around 1%. So a good day here for good old LPLA. It's not actually a good year for them as well, even though it's been kind of topsy-turvy. A year ago, they were trading 61 and a quarter, so well shy of where they are right now. They're threatening $90 right now. Then they kind of sold off to about their low of around 54, almost 55, almost a little bit south of 55 handle, 54.90 or so. And then they kind of rebounded from there. That was on Christmas Eve, of course, the nadir from the market. Within a week, or about a month or so, they were trading 77, so they bounced pretty hard off that. Then they sold off again to 68, then back up to 85, and back down to 77. So it's been a lot of back and forth on this name, but all of it pretty much north of that 70 handle. Bounced off 71 again in August after selling off from 87, back up to 84. So one of those kind of things, bouncing up and down, but net up. And we're on another upswing here, like I said, hitting nearly $90 right now, which is pretty much right around its 52-week high here as well today. So we're on the upswing, Mr. Rock Lobster. Let's see what we got going on out here. So upswing, big upside move. You think there is probably something in the calls, and that is exactly what we got going on. Going out to April this time, going all the way out to April pars, a.k.a. the April 100 calls. Mr. Rock Lobster, looks like somebody is saying, if it gets to 100, I'll sell this thing. Because he's selling 5,700 of these par calls for a nice, rich, and juicy $2.75. That was on the bid. He wasn't messing around. They were $2.75 to $3. He wasn't saying I'm going to hold out for $2.80 or $2.85. None of that. Right on the bid. Worth noting, and Mr. Rock Lobster, I do love this. This new data we're getting in these prints is fantastic. Went up on the MyX, so our friends on the MyX getting a big print. It was a cross, which is fascinating to see this information. That means, of course, listeners, it was crossed effectively between. Usually that means a customer and another customer taking the other side, or it could be maybe the brokerage firm that's putting it up took down the other side on behalf of their customer. On a name like this, I'm maybe going to lean the latter. Kind of hard to find a counterparty, I would think, a legit quote-unquote counterparty for the other side of this. Maybe they took it down to facilitate their customer. Either way, this was crossed, so it didn't go up to a liquidity provider. And it's also opening, which is good to know, and complex. All this data, Mr. Rockhouse, I feel like it's an embarrassment of riches. By the way, there are earnings, and they are in January. January 30th is the next earnings announcement. So this goes beyond just a straight-up earnings place. Mr. Rock Lobster, we got someone going out to April, drawing an upside line in the sand this time at the par strike, saying this stock that's already at a 52-week high, if it rallies another 10 or so bucks, I'm out. And for the privilege of that, he's getting $2.75, and looks like he got facilitated as well. So what do you think about this one, Mr. Rock Lobster?
I think I'm all the short answer is I am going to agree with your assessment of this particular one.
Well, let me ask you that really quickly. When you see cross, when I say cross, I mean, obviously it can mean a bunch of things. People always intuit that there's, a customer on the other side of that, but something like this, you got to figure maybe a firm's at play, right?
Yeah, or, sometimes remember that they would cross stuff because it's the firm wanted it, or the firm, sometimes the firm match, because they go and look for the other side on some of the stuff, where they know they have a customer that wants a position in a particular stock. But they're trying to put that up too. That makes sure that it's kind of everybody knows that the liquidity provider really, the liquidity, like the floor community, quote unquote, loosely saying floor community.
They did not play on this.
They're not providing the other side.
By the way, this would have been highly illegal back in the day when I first walked on this. You can't cross on my bid. What are you doing? They don't care about that crap anymore.
No, because they'll just go to one of the other 15 exchanges and cross it on the bid.
Exactly. Philly will let us cross on your bid, so the hell with you. But we're digressing. Go ahead, sir. Finish your analysis.
But I think that's or they want to put something up, or they're trying to a customer that they want, or they're trying to give a better bid than anybody else is. There are a lot of reasons that the street does certain things. So usually all of them revolve around money somehow. So that's just a guess. I think but it's marked cross, so you can see that, that they have both sides coming in.
This is me getting a lot more information and then wanting more. This is me being a little bit of a piggy here. But yeah, I would love to say cross like customer or cross firm, because those are two very different things. One has an actual economic intent behind it, and one is just maybe, hey, we're making our customer happy. Maybe they don't really want to sit on these. They don't want to buy these 8 pars for $275, but they like their customers, so they'll take them down and figure something else to do with them. So a little bit different there. But hey, we love this wash of new data we're getting, which makes it fun. Let's move on to another weirdo name out here. Let's go all the way out. If that was too rich for your blood, nearly $90, listeners, we got you covered on the downside. Let's head on out now to intracellular therapies. It's not an odd block without some cheapy biotech name. And this one is ITCI is the ticker. Trading right now $8.94, off a couple of cents, so not really a big day for them. It's been kind of a wild year, as you would imagine, for any biotech. A year ago, they were trading nearly $16, so nearly 2x where they are right now. Then they sold off at the great nadir almost immediately down to about 10. And they bounced right back off of it by January, middle of January. They're trading 13.25 again. Then they sold off again back down to 10 and back up to 13 and change. And a lot of those peaks and troughs with some big sell-offs. It got up to 14 or so in July. The 52-week high was actually 17.5. I think it hit that right in late November. I don't see where it hit that on this chart, but still, it sold off. It got up to about 14 again in July, then sold off again immediately down to 10, and then within a couple more weeks, it was trading 8 again, back kind of where we are right now. So it's kind of been vacillating all over the place. But ever since July or so, it's kind of been in this 8 to about 10 or so range. And we're kind of on the upswing again, but now coming off of it, it seems like a little bit again as well, since we rallied up recently to almost $10 again, $9.91 before selling off. That was on November 5th, so selling off over the course of the last week. So it's been an interesting, turbulent year, as you would expect, for a small, cheapy biotech. Let's see what we saw on our Eye of Sauron today. It was puts. Go figure. Puts lighting it up here. It was D5s. So I said we're trading at about $9, $8.95 or so, listeners. And it was the D5 puts lighting it up 5,000 times for 35 cents. This guy did play a little bit. It was 15 F40. He got him done for 35 cents. So he got a little bit of action. Also, we're done. There's another floor-based print going up on the Philly. I love all this data now. I'm just giddy with data here. This was opening on the Philly floor over there. So yeah, interesting stuff. The floor is where the action still is, listeners. At least for this kind of stuff. The size, quote unquote, complex, high touch type paper. There are earnings, but not before this option goes the way of the dodo. The earnings are on February 26th. So Mr. Rock Lobster, seems like someone's looking at this chart saying, you know what, I've had a bit of enough of this this back and forth. I'm going to lock myself out. But he's picking an interesting level. He's picking the 5 handle, which is about $4 shy of where we are right now. And he's buying protection all the way out about a month. So, yeah, I'm not sure what this guy is up to. What's your take, Mr. Rock Lobster, aside from throwing away 35 cents 5,000 times?
In this case, there's a little bit of vol in this. The Jan vol is 192%. So, and it looks like they still want to buy them. They're still the bid for them. So, it's one of these. I think this is what we'll just call a crossroads in the life of Intracellular Therapies Incorporated, where probably a pretty darn big announcement's coming out. So that's what it would look like. That's what it looks like to me. So why you bother buying the 5 puts? I guess, in case the stock goes to zero, or they want to buy puts in stock, which is again a pretty common biotech thing. But either way, it's a pretty good chunk of paper in a stock that doesn't have a lot of open interest. So there's actually that block is more than the open interest is in the whole cycle. So, I mean, you do the arithmetic on that. There's something funky going on in that name. That's what it's hard for me to intuit anything else besides that.
There is something funky indeed, sir. Check your chat so that way you'll be happy. You'll leave me alone. I'm trying to run a show here, sir. Got you chiming in my ear all over the place here. All right, let's go into our last name here, our last victim. This is one we were just talking about, breaking into the top 10 for the first time, at least since we've been doing this show. It is Canopy Growth Corp. Of course, they are in the post-earnings blush here. They had earnings, I believe, this morning before the bell. Ticker symbol CGC, part of this growing cannabis wave out here. Let's see, trading $15.72 right now. Excuse me, off nearly $3 or about 15%. So not a good day here for CGC. Seems like this whole sector has come under some pressure of late. This thing was trading a year ago, $34.30. So well north, about 2x where it is right now. Sold off in the Great Nadir down to 26.25. Then it rallied back up by the end of January, it's trading 47 again. So it rebounded nicely. And then it kind of drifted down to 41 by April. Then rallied, must have been earnings around the April time frame because it rallied back up to 52. And that was pretty much the high for the year, 52.74. And then it just pretty much never looked back from that April 29th point. It's been a long, slow, just dredge to the downside here, listeners. Hitting its nadir right now, 15.19 today. So not a good look here ever since April for Canopy Growth. And you might think puts would be the action, but no, that is not the case. We got some calls going up. It looks like it might be, well, it's kind of hard to tell with these tight markets, but it looks like it might be a little bit of the old overwrite, which is kind of interesting. Maybe someone deciding this thing ain't going north again anytime soon. We got the Nove 15 halves, so these going out pretty soon for 37 cents, 656 times. On the bid, they were 37 cents at 38. Surprisingly tight for a post-earnings volatile name like this, but they were. Someone hitting the bid over there on the NOM, a.k.a. the NASDAQ options market. More interestingly, these are opening. Of course, most of these trades we talk about, pretty much all of them listeners are going to be opening, unless we're going back to review something, looking at a close or a roll. But most of them are going to be opening. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be on our radar. This is, again, post-earnings at a 52-week low. So, yeah, Mr. Rock Lobster, I did not expect someone coming out after the stock has been annihilated and saying, hey, yeah, I'm gonna sell further upside to the tune of the Nove 15 halves. What do you think about this one, sir, to take us home? Upside call, looks like an overwrite maybe. Hard to tell with such a tight market, but overwrite maybe in Canopy Growth, sir.
So this is a pot stock, right?
That does appear to be the case, sir.
You know what? I look at this whole section like, is it a surprise now that it's legal? It just becomes a cheap commodity. So, sorry, I just found that funny to myself. And I think, it's like wheat. So, why not just write some calls? Because everybody's basically given up on the fact that these stocks were 4 times higher last year because, woohoo, all of a sudden everybody's selling pot. I do not live in a highly populated area, but from my town to, let's say, a town 18 miles away, there's 6 storefronts to buy some kind of pot thing. So I just think the whole business is saturated, and people can knock themselves out. But I just, at this point, if somebody's writing calls against the pot stock, if you're looking for that hot bounce, I don't think you're going to find it.
Yeah, if they're buying them, they are looking for that hot bounce. So if they're selling them, they're looking to harvest a little bit of the old premium between now and pretty much the end of the week here. That's when these things are going out. So look, they could just be looking to get a little bit of overwrite juice. 37 cents, 4,600 times, not the worst thing. So maybe, you know what? Here's what we'll do. We'll come back to our friend. We'll see if he kept his 37 cents. Or if maybe something else was afoot here. We shall find out. As we keep on rolling, it's time for you guys to get on with a little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, let's get to it. Let's see what you guys got on the brain. Let's see here. Stement, something like that, wants to know, what are the top 5 days in market history? I'm assuming he's referring back to that chart we mentioned. I believe it was from Market Watch a few episodes ago where they detailed the number one day in market history, in which case, if you were wondering, listeners, I think the day we talked about it was actually when it was, which was October 28th. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's when we were talking about this. That was the number one day in market history. He wants to know, what are the top 5s? Well, again, according to this data, I haven't independently verified this. This goes back all the way to 1950. So 1950 to 2018, these are just net aggregate returns on that particular day in the S&P. Let's look. So number 1 is October 28th. Number 2 looks like we have to go out to 26, actually. So it looks like, the day after Christmas. Surprising. I would not have guessed that, but probably something to do with how quiet the day before is. Everything's off. Everyone's coming back into the market. So some orders piling in there as a result. Then we go to, that's up 0.5%, by the way. So number 1 day is 0.54%, October 28th. Number 2, December 26th, up 0.5%, exactly. Number 3, looks like we go out to Nov 24th, I think that is. Kind of hard to read this chart. Yeah, Nov 24th, up 0.45%. Number 4, we've got back to October. Looks like October 20th. So the day after, well, there's a little bit of bias there because obviously the 19th is the worst day for the markets. I wonder why that could be. That's off 0.51%. The day after, the 20th, is the best day, or fourth best day for the markets, up 0.41%. And then rounding out the top 5, let's look here. Looks like it's a tie for up 0.38% between November 3rd and also December 15th, both up 0.38%. So there you go, completely unverified data showing you the best day in the market, or at least the best top 5 days. We've got DEVANIKH chiming in. He's nervous. He says, I have 2,800 shares of Dean Foods with an over $1,500 loss. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. and Mrs. DEVANIKH. He wants to know, is this going to zero? Please advise. Well, yeah, they declared bankruptcy, so it's not looking good. Mr. Last Data Krypton, I'm assuming you're getting a lot of calls on Dean Foods these days. What are you advising people, and what do you advise our friend DEVANIKH? Is this name going to zero, sir?
Not on Dean Foods specifically, but over the years, the question has popped up on a few names here, some bigger than others. What I always advise, I mean, if the stock is still trading, remember, even though you've taken a loss on it here, you may still have some value left in it. It's up to you to ultimately make that decision. Is this something you want to hold on to that stock for years and see if it comes out of bankruptcy to maybe recoup, or you want to take what you have left and maybe look for another opportunity elsewhere? Keep in mind, depending on how these bankruptcies go, I mean, it's possible the company could come out of bankruptcy, but could mean that the shares get delisted and new shares get listed. So you could lose all your value there. It is possible it could come out and do have some value left. So it's very tough. I mean, as investors, we're often looking at, looking towards fundamental information, looking at charts, and you're in a period with a lot of unknowns. You have to decide if that ultimately is a risk that you want to continue to take, or just take what you have left and move on to something maybe you have a little better eye on, have some better prospects on.
Mr. Rocklobster, I'm sure you've traded a name or two in your day that have gone the way of the dodo. What do you counsel here, our friend DEVANIKH? It's just like Dean Foods right now, trading a whopping 12 cents. Should he take his 12 cents 2,800 times and get the hell out of Dodge?
This is another one I like. They make milk, right? Hard to believe they went bankruptcy. They went bankrupt.
It's the almond milk, baby. Almond milk. Shutting them down, the traditional dairy. Folks like me who can't drink the dairy, they can't eat the dairy.
By the way, we have to answer this next question because this is the best ever. But I think it's toast. They're not going to. It's gone. It's bankruptcy. There's nothing you can do, and it's going to zero. What I would say is, since you really can't lose any more money, just don't do anything. Because from here, all it could happen is something good. Maybe somehow there's some sort of stub equity or something. But usually in bankruptcy, the people that lose are the equity shareholders. That's the risk of owning stocks. So I would say there's not much to do at this point except, see what happens. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Tell them I'm sorry that they lost their dough on Dean Food.
Yeah, looks like that 2,800 shares is worth a whopping $336 right now. So it's up to you if you want to harvest the remainder of that. I'm kind of with the Rocklobster. It's probably going the way of the dodo, so that's might be money. You might as well get what you can out of it, or you decide at this point it's just a $336 lottery ticket on Dean somehow restructuring, coming back with any sort of equity value remaining. That's a big if. Usually that's not the case, but like you mentioned, the stockholders are last in line there. But I haven't dug into the specifics of this one. Maybe there is optimism there, so we can't make that decision for you. But past this prologue there, unfortunately, Mr. and Mrs. DEVANIKH, not looking good. You want to do this last one, Mr. Rockless? Okay, we can do this one. We can do one more. Let's go to Todd Charles. He wants to know, what is your Eye of Sauron? How do you find your unusual activity? Well, it's kind of just a cool name for this process that we have for finding these things. It sounds cool. It's the giant eye, of course, that was depicted infamously in the Lord of the Rings movies as this giant ball of flame that's always searching, always scouring. Not quite the way it is in the books, but it's a good visual nonetheless. And how do we do this? How do we get asked this all the time. We do a lot of different services, a lot of different processes. We'll scan, we'll look at different things. So it's kind of hard for you to easily replicate that. I will say that if you want to get some analog of this in one place, one of the services we do use for this is Trade Alert and Mr. Schwartz in his infinite wisdom. So if you're a full-bore member of Trade Alert, so the option alert service, you can replicate a variation of this. You go in there, he has created our own private customer. I think everyone can access this, though. We have a button for it, but others can access it. He has created something called the Odd Block in there because he is a long-standing fan of the show. So if you go in and type /Odd Block, you will see a bunch of names coming up that meet certain criteria that we have established over the past, like, high volume versus usual volume. Are they opening? Interesting things like that. So if you are an option alert user, you can go do a version of this for yourself right now. Otherwise, you got to do it the hard way. You got to go search through some scanners and whatever platforms you have access to. I don't know. Some brokers offer basic scanners now, so a lot of you can approximate some version of this looking for unusual activity and things like that. Usually compare it to previous volume. You usually want to focus on opening as well because that's more interesting. Closing stuff is kind of obvious what they're up to there, so we like to focus on opening. And then we find some other things. Obviously, we filter out things like we were just talking about earlier today, like the div plays. Those aren't real economic activity. Even some of these crosses are kind of interesting from that perspective. Are they real economic activity or not is the debate. But interesting stuff. Mr. Rocklobster, anything you want to add here before we roll on into our final segment?
No, I mean, on this one, there's Henry has a great service. Obviously, it's a great, it is. If you're an active trader, it is a great service. There's live vol. There other services have ideas like LiveVol does, and Lime. They have some activity reporting. So, but it is, it's activity. I mean, what I learned trading is if you're a game theorist, activity kind of moves the needle a little bit. When there's a lot of volume, that's generally, that's news. Like option volume is news. And what people are doing and how they're doing it is newsworthy, and it helps. It could help certainly a short-term decision or maybe a long-term decision. So then you can see what people are doing. And as a floor trader, people always want to know what was trading in the old days. So I still look at stuff like this all the time, and sometimes it helps me, find a trade.
And it helps us move on into our final segment. It is time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, let's go around the block. And since we are coming up against it, we'll make it a bit of a combo around the block. And if they want to check out your platform of choice, there we go. There's that music. All right, let's start off. Let's go the way we came. Let's go to the Rock Lobster, sir. What are you watching for the rest of this week? And also, folks want to learn more. Maybe they want you to text them with some alerts. Where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Tonight, when I watch the rest of the week, see what happens. Trade deal, impeachment, and go to our website. I'm doing a webinar tonight on how to look at the current VIX curve, use the products that Option Pit makes, and create a trade that's based around this whole impeachment thing. So there you go. It's for free, and it's tonight, 7 Eastern time. Go to our website, optionpit.com.
There you go. Impeachment. A little bit of VIX, optionpit.com to learn more. Same question for you, Mr. Uncle Mike. What are you watching for the rest of this week? And then if folks want to engage with you, they want you to maybe hold their hands through these turbulent markets, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Impeachment 3100, China, Twitter, not the stock, but a certain person's Twitter account. And if you are looking to invest with someone who is looking at all those things and actually believes that volatility can be an asset class, it is an asset class, go to stcharleswealth.com. Love to work with you in some way, shape, or form.
And last but not least, we got the last data Krypton, Mr. Jarrell, holding down the Fidelity Active Trader strategy seat. Sir, easy for me to say, Active Trader, hot seats. What are you watching for the rest of this week? And if folks want to kick the tires over there in Fidelity Land, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. So tomorrow, a slew of economic data in the morning. I'll be paying attention to retail sales and industrial production, both out. See where those numbers come if they get a little bit of a bounce back. After hours today, earnings kind of slowing down, but NVIDIA's reporting after the bell, sitting at kind of an interesting resistance points. Had a few big bounces the last couple of earnings. Option market looking at a little under a $14 move. So be paying attention to that one here today. But as always, if you want to learn more about my team, reach out to us here at fidelity.com/options. Right, you can learn about more about our platform. We've got some great scans that are pre-built here to help you look through the option market. Or give us a call, 877-907-4429. Happy to help you out over the phone as well. Tell you about some of the things we do and offer for you at Fidelity and the Strategy Desk.
There you go. Fidelity.com/options is the place to go. And I do have the Russell folks coming into the studio as we speak, Mr. Trey. So I'll be sure to pass along your inquiries about Russell 2000 to them. Fidelity.com/options, listeners, is the place to go to begin your journey. On behalf of the Last Data, Krypton, and the Rock Lobster, and Uncle Mike, and indeed myself, I want to thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing, for sending in so many great questions and comments. We only scratched the surface. We'll get to more of them next time. And we'll see you back here in about a half an hour for TWIFO, and then tomorrow for Vol Views, and then we do it all again on Monday for more of the Option Block.
The Option Block is brought to you by Fidelity Investments. Fidelity's Option Trade Builder tool can help you confidently build an options trade in 3 simple steps. Just choose a strategy, select a contract, and then review the benefits and risks of the trade. Learn more about Option Trade Builder at fidelity.com/options. Options trading entails significant risk and is not appropriate for all investors. Certain complex option strategies carry additional risk. Before trading options, contact Fidelity Investments by calling 800-544-5115 to receive a copy of the characteristics and risks of standardized options. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.